Hi everybody, welcome to another process video. Today we are taking a look at the process, could be about 20 minutes of me working through this piece based on the original concept by Gabo Camarillo, also known as Silvermender online, of a character named Pint. Pint is a sort of a nuclear mutant. I'm not as versed on all of the details of the backstory as I'd love to be, but he is able to take on this lion-esque kind of monster form. And Gabo's whole body of work is just really incredible. They're a super talented concept artist and storyboard artist. So I've been a big fan for a long time, and it was a really fun challenge to try and take on some of the ideas and shapes and anatomy from Gabo's work and adapt it to my style. Since we've been talking about doing a bit of an exchange for a while now. One of the main challenges initially was just to get used to, acclimated to the proportions and shapes that she uses for her design of Pint, which, I've done a lot of similar kind of creature designs, but there's just something about someone else's work where the specifics of the anatomy and the exact proportions are particular to them and not something that I necessarily would have chosen to do on my own, but something I really admired, and I want to really get it right as much as I could. I didn't want to stray so far from the proportions and the concepts that it was, something that I was making entirely my own, because I really like the wild, kind of aggressive, kind of a little bit terrifying kind of nature of the proportions and the designs that she does. So I wanted to see what would happen if I took that energy, that shape language, and adapted it to volume, and with maybe just a little bit more kind of rounded softness that is just the sort of thing I can't seem to help doing. So what you've seen me do just now is go through a bunch of warm-up sketches, just trying to get the proportions and the sense of the volumes in my head. Then I showed those to her, and we picked the one that felt more like a kind of this pug dog energy, kind of the duck-footed kind of stance in the front. Felt like a fun pose that gave Pint a lot of character. Or at least, rather, I mean, I'm not giving him character, but it showed off the character that he has. Tricky part of this piece was keeping the hair the right kind of wild. Again, it's the sort of shapes and arrangement of hair that I wouldn't necessarily do myself. There's stuff that I definitely would do, and stuff that it wouldn't occur to me to do that I really like and admire. And so, like any master copy, really, when you're working from the direct design of somebody whose work you admire, it's a really cool opportunity to learn about how they arrange shapes in a way that you just can't quite learn from just looking at it. I think I really kind of fit a lot of the process and the design into my head by actually working through it stage by stage in a way that I just observing and kind of referencing it obliquely, I don't think I would have, and I really recommend it as an exercise. So by now most of you are pretty familiar with my process, I would imagine. Just flatting out the shapes and trying to get the silhouette knocked in as crisply as I can. With all the very extreme hairstyling, I had my work cut out for me on this one. This time I actually spent a little time using the lasso tool to try and save my wrists from cramping up too badly. So I would do a little lassoing and then clean it up with a brush just to get the right shapes. I've found that, a lot of people use lassoing for the blocking into their design work. I think most of the people who do usually have line art that they're working inside of, which makes a lot more sense. For me, since the blocking of the silhouette of the shape is going to be the literal silhouette and the shape that I'm going to be using for the whole piece, the whole design, I really like to finesse it with a brush. Usually, in this case, Tara's oval sketch brush, but not exclusively, depending. There's been using a brush from one of Georg von Westphalen's sets called the Fancy Evil brush for some of the sort of textured flyaway hairstyle things. And the hair was a fight. I wanted to get that wild kind of spiky energy. Uh, my natural style tends to make things a little more flowy and kind of classically appealing, but you kind of wind up with like a hairstyle instead of kind of this wild mane, and I was really fighting my natural tendencies to make him look like he had gone to get a spiffy haircut. With these shapes, I really found that every bit of the process involved me sort of pulling back from some of my natural tendencies and learning a little bit about Gabo's work. The teeth were another one. I really wanted to get that. Oh man, the dinosaur's name is escaping me, but there's an sort of ancient marine dinosaur. I guess not dinosaur. I don't know what you would call it. Reptile of the oceans that has these sort of single-plated teeth that I really wanted to make sure that it's in the original design. Well, with the hair and with the musculature, Gobbo's done so much of the work in the designs, really loose and really gestural, and I love that about them. In this version of it, I had to, just by virtue of adapting it to a more painterly style, make a lot of decisions about how to specify. So the hair had to become a lot more particular as opposed to kind of a bunch of gestural shapes. I had to sort of show exactly what was going on, and with the muscles as well. Luckily, Gabo has an incredible sense of anatomy and knows exactly what's going on, so I was able to use all these source drawings, all these different turns and stuff like that as a map for exactly what I needed to do. It's a good lesson, actually, realizing how thoroughly she worked through the anatomy and turned the character around. And sometimes, in my own contract work and real jobs, I don't do that many turns, and I now see in adapting this design how helpful that can be for people. I would imagine sculptors for sure, as they work with a 2D design, adapting that. The more information you have, the better you can hone in on those details. There's always something to reference and realize, I could, kind of push things this way, which would be my natural tendency, but it's hard to deny where the rib cage falls, how the volumes of the muscles work out when Gabo's already done so much work to show exactly how that is. Another big challenge of this piece was trying to get this sense of light under the skin. There's a couple ways to interpret Gabo's concept in that regard, because it's not super clear whether this is like kind of a electricity on its own, or whether it's running through specific veins under the skin, and so it should look almost more veiny than lightning-y. So I made the call to go more lightning-y, because I think that's what I was seeing in the concepts from Gabo. But getting the look right, I'm not sure that I really fully achieved that here, of light coming from under the skin, and I'll definitely have to pay more attention in the future to what that really looks like, and try and get that effect honed in. So with all that blocked in, now it's the sort of fun part where I get to go in with the shadow layer and create the volumes that sort of define the shapes of the design. I knew with this, I really wanted to give it the deluxe treatment, really paying attention to the finer details and the sort of, just the nuances and specifics of creases and volumes, and make them really feel each shadow had a reason to be there, and that it was really intentional and fully thought out. Sometimes I can get a little gestural, and that could be fine for most pieces or concepts, but I think it was just kind of the mood I was in as well. I really wanted to do something more polished. And this was a fun opportunity to do that. It's another recommendation I would say that, if you're looking to work on the level of polish and just the pure technique, working with somebody else's design can be a really great way to do that, because I'm not thinking as much about, you know, what color the mouth's going to be, how long, what shape, that's all already established, and I can just focus on the painting, um, which is really a fun place to be. It's not, all I want to do all the time, but it's definitely a nice thing to be able to take a break and just focus on just how it looks. With these big soft volumes of the triceps and deltoid, and uh, I wanted to really get the full sense of the roundedness of the volume, and so you're seeing the brushstroke kind of push and pull. What I'm doing is kind of laying in shadows and then using the smudge tool to kind of push those shadows around to make sure I'm getting the volumes that I want. I'm finding with Procreate, as I continue to learn the way it works best, that the smudge tool is definitely a big help in achieving some of the looks that I might have done maybe with just a soft brush in Photoshop. Smudging kind of helps get that sort of soft gradient look. And I find that I really like that. I have a lot of control now that I'm used to it. This is super fun. A little tricky though, because without the line art in the hands, I used to rely heavily on inks and line art. It's sometimes tricky to navigate really complex shapes with just light and shadow. To make sure that you can see, what's a knuckle and what's the pad of the palm, and then the wrist as it turns and stuff like that. So it's tricky. I spend a lot of time just kind of focusing on making the hands work. He needs to be fussing with the cleft, not cleft, the muscles in the butt, the gluteus over there. I was very conscious of realizing, like, I really wanted to get all the cool kind of voluminous musculature of this character, but I didn't want it to get too kind of weird. And so I kept on sort of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make all these like cool volumes, and the more I volumized the butt, the more it started to feel like, is this getting odd? Like, is this? I don't want everyone to just stare at this creature's buttocks, so I had to sort of pull back every now and again. It's a funny thing, striking the right balance. Even as I'm doing this, you're thinking about the pure rendering and technique. It's also communicative. You're showing the design and you're drawing focus as you do that. So the rendering process, I've found over the years of doing this in various different ways that you can either enhance and develop the sense of a sketch and the sense of the character and their personality, or you can fight it, and if in the end all you're looking at is sort of the waves of hair and stuff like that, and you just get lost in parts of the design that are a little bit distracting, it's not ideal, from my perspective as the designer. I really want you to look at him on the whole, and in particular, my favorite part of this character of Pint is his mouth. The long mouth with the face right up at the front is absolutely one of my favorite design elements. So the rendering goes on as it does for a while. I struggle when I stream anything like this live, because so many parts of the process can just stretch on and they become really zen for me, but I think that sometimes it's a blessing to have it sped up a little bit, as it is here. Because I get lost in it, but it really does take a while. And I'm not sure that everyone always realizes sort of how long some designs can take versus others, and some people work so quickly, I can't believe it. But I'm realizing in my old age that I'm like moderately, I can get stuff done when I need to, but I'm actually kind of slow. So with the shadows knocked in, there's a lot of moments of kind of fussing and finessing and sort of stepping back and looking and saying, okay, I think this is in a good spot. What are the sort of next more specific steps? And for a while, you'll see here, I spent some time sort of fussing with the specifics of the hair. The reality is that at this point, we could be very close to finished. But like I said earlier, I really wanted this to have sort of the most deluxe treatment I could give it. Um, and so, I'm trying to think of and strategize about ways to get more specific. And the best way I find, sometimes it can be difficult. I used to get really stuck, and I still do sometimes, with when is it finished? Like what is the next thing to do once you feel like you've done all the steps of your normal process? Is that enough? Is there more to add that you should add to a piece? And my answer to that is usually, is everything clear? It's not always the priority, but often, especially in concept design, clarity is a really important principle. And what I'm doing now at these sort of, new layers of shadow complexity and little details in the hair and into the musculature, I'm looking for areas where maybe it's not reading as clearly as it is in my head. Where I'm, someone seeing this for the first time might not know what's sort of rounding what corner and what's in front of something else, and what's meant to be glowing versus what's meant to be matte, and so it's not as much about making it pretty as it is about making it clear to a viewer. And pretty is of course always part of the equation. What you've just seen is some sort of I call it kind of fluffing. It's like an overlay layer and sort of puffing out some glows and stuff like that. Again, the goal is not to get so carried away with that it gets really distracting. And here, the painting is now much more sort of direct, kind of finishing touch style painting. We're not really rounding out on the very end of it quite yet, but I'm going in and, I've established the midtones and the shadows. Now I'm going in with kind of highlights. And recently, I've been interested in the idea that maybe a highlight layer doesn't have to be brighter. It could be sort of almost just the same value as the midtone, but more saturated. And I kind of like the look of that. It kind of gives things kind of a satin gloss instead of like a bright kind of oily shine. It's more of a like a pearlescence, if that makes any sense. I know that's a lot of kind of fancy words that might mean nothing to you, but I find that I have a lot of weirdly specific ideas about what I like to see in a design, and I really don't love making everything like as shiny as possible, because I think it can get really distracting. Which is actually something I'm fighting right now in the video in the hair. I'm painting through highlights in the hair, trying to fill in some of the gaps and give it more of a sense of volume. Again, trying to make sure that even as I do that, I'm not giving him too foofy a do. Nothing too sort of satiny and shampooed looking, if I can help it. So you'll see I go kind of back and forth a little bit. I like add a little and I take a little away. I may come back to it. At this point, also thinking about rim lighting, and rim lighting is another thing. It's that slick kind of shine that can make something look like it's got that oily kind of metallic quality. And I really don't want that, but I do like, again, what it can do in terms of adding visual clarity and breaking up the different planes of a design. So you can see that this tuft of hair is projecting out away and forward from the other bits of hair. But I don't want to go overboard and put that everywhere, because then, if everything's special, nothing is. So with that added, then I turn that all to sort of dustier, kind of more subtle colors, so it's not all one uniform shine. And we're just about done here. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you later.